Good evening. This is Animal on Control. Welcome to the voice chat. Conversation starters, neighborhood barkathalon, self-defense outrage porn, service mutt redux, and potpourri. Joining me is animal abuse in Hungary. Thanks for joining.
Hello, everybody, and thanks for the invitation.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you're always invited. I want to say you've been doing a lot of work recently. You did a whole series, a whole watch list going over different topics, like how particularly was interesting was how using dogs as security is complete BS, particularly in a crowded modern environment. So that was all of them were really good, and I recommend everyone check those out. So I know of course anybody can join. So one thing I wanted to share, starting with the first conversation starters, is probably everybody's really favorite topic, or why most people get into this space, as per my observation. Dog noise pollution, right? Everybody's favorite issue. And what's interesting is that, I hadn't had a barking issue in the neighborhood for a long time. Now, outside, if you step outside, you can hear dogs bark off in the distance, but I don't do anything. And most of them are pretty far away, actually. Nothing within, say, 100 or 150 meters. So where I draw the line is that as long as I don't hear it when I'm inside, the home is my sanctuary, right? The home is your sanctuary. I don't escalate it. But here's what happened. I don't want to say they're new, but across the street neighbor, just to give everybody a little background, it's a late 40-something couple with two college-age kids. So there's 4 adults over there. And actually, I think what it is the one daughter is hers and the other one is his, I think. But in any case, and they have this about 2 years ago, they picked up this black lab. And, they're not the greatest dog owners, but what was going on over there fell far below what I would consider a threshold for a complaint, right? Like the dog didn't behave dangerously. It didn't noise pollute. So he didn't bother me. I didn't really think about it much. I mean, the thing is, though, what they do is with him is he's inside most of the time, which is fine with me because then he's not outside causing a problem, right? So he's not outside. But they just let him out. They don't walk him. They don't have a fenced-in yard or someplace where he can, walk around in a contained way. They just let him out. And he wanders around. Sometimes he'll follow, like if somebody's walking a dog, he'll just kind of follow them up the block. Oh, boy. But you know what? It's like I'm not making a big deal out of it, right? I mean, I could call animal control, but it's like whatever. And I've been getting along with them. So it was about 2 weeks ago. I started hearing a lot of barking. Maybe not a lot, but I started hearing barking, periodically throughout the day. And it started getting worse. And at first I didn't know where it was coming from because I never really heard him bark. They'd had the dog for 2 years without any issues, right? But what I realized what was happening was this was just late last week, because last week I was actually, because I work from home and I'm on a video call. The dog was, barked on and off during the call, disrupted the call. This is how I make a living, right? So I'm really pissed off at this point. But I wasn't even sure it was him. I wasn't really sure where it was coming from. But here's what was happening. I guess it was Friday, I figured out what was happening was when they would let him out, they'd let him out, but then they wouldn't let him back in. At least not right away. They would eventually, but they just, instead of letting him out for 5 or 10 minutes, they'd leave him out for an hour. but he didn't want to be out. So what he'd do is he'd go to the front door and start barking to get let back in, right? So this was, I noted it was on Saturday. Is just barking on and off, and of course I have, particularly after what I've been through, and most of the folks know, I have like almost zero tolerance for this, right? Because I've been through it before. I can't take it. I've just had it with this, right? So, but interestingly, on Saturday, so finally I said enough. I went over there. It was after it got dark, but the dog was already back inside, right? So I'm standing there, and remember, everybody was home. There's 4 adults in that house, right? So Sunday rolls around, and it's Sunday. I spent the whole morning doing yard work. So I get cleaned up, and I'm sitting, and the dog starts barking. It's about 1 PM, and he carries like nonstop for probably at least 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And that's enough to escalate a complaint, because we have, I don't know if they have these where you are, but it's a consecutive disruption law. In other words, the dog has to bark continuously without a break of more than 30 seconds for X number of minutes before it becomes actionable. So it's barking. So I'm like, all right. And so I said, all right, I'll give this one shot, just one, right? So I walked over there, and it's funny because as soon as I got there, the dog was still outside. He stopped barking. He was glad to see me. He just, wanted company. So ring the doorbell. The one college age kid answers the door, and it was hers. It was the missus's kid. And I said, look, when your dog barks to get let back in the house, would you please do so? Because it's really loud. It's been disrupting my work. And I went on to say, I said, look, we've been neighbors for 4 years. You've had the dog for 2 years. We've gotten along. It's been cool. I just want it to stay that way. And she was really, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was just really busy. I didn't get a chance. And And I said, fine. But I'm like, but I want to say to these people, like, what are they, deaf? Like they can't, this is, their house, we're not scrunched up against each other. Their house is a good 50 meters away, and it's not directly across the street either. If you look out my front door, it's at maybe 1 o'clock, right? So I said, okay, cool. Just to let you know, it's like I just want things to stay cool between us. Because the thing too is, you got to realize, I'd actually talked to them about this maybe a year ago. And I was talking to him about something else, something totally unrelated to pets and dogs and stuff. But what came up was maybe one of them mentioned some other neighbor's dog. And I said, a block war broke out here, 10 years ago. And I almost wound up suing a prior occupant over their barky dog, right? And they were like, because they had their dog. And they're like really just kind of defensive, like hands up, saying, "Oh no, we don't want to listen to that either. Don't worry about that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's." I wasn't complaining about their dog because the dog hadn't been a problem at that point, but they already knew that I was somebody who would go after people who do stuff like this, and yet there they are doing it. I guess maybe they're just slipping, just getting lazy. But so far, and I'm knocking on wood, so far, like this week has been pretty. I might have heard a couple of whoops, but I can live with that. So, so that's my neighborhood barking issue. But just like you were mentioning last time, you're thinking of actually relocating to, I guess it was Switzerland, right?
To Austria, actually.
Oh, to Austria. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Austria.
No worries.
Yeah,
I get confused myself too with my.
Which country is it again?
Which country am I in?
Yeah,
I'm not sure sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been for a while now. I've been considering moving out of here to a more rural area.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe staying in Florida. Florida actually is really nice, countryside, really nice farm country, believe it or not. But of course that raises challenges also. And sort of like, rural Florida also has a really big stray dog problem. In fact, I don't know, I know this has come up on other VCs, a mail carrier was killed by a pack of that large dogs not too long ago. It's a really big problem. So that it has other challenges too, like getting services, and healthcare, and internet, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a challenge also. But I was thinking of doing it not necessarily for that reason, but just for various other reasons. It would just be more conducive to my interests. Let's just put it that way. Plus, but I've been looking. I go to say realtor.com. I always look at, how is the home situated compared to other homes? Like, is there somebody close enough to, like, again, noise pollute you if they want to, or let it happen?
Yeah. That is that's funny. That's funny that you're actually telling this story, because there's something very similar going on here where I live now. First of all, now, I mean, if I showed some videos, where you can actually see my street, so you see that the houses are very close to each other. So there's basically no escaping here, and even though it actually does count as a countryside, so it's a countryside town, but that's what they look like in Hungary. And I mean, you can find houses that are further outside of the towns, and where you have like 500 meters the next neighbor, or perhaps even a kilometer.
Sure.
And then you would, of course, have probably peace and quiet, but that's a different story. Now, the funny thing is, you were mentioning that your neighbors have a black Labrador, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Now, I actually I have the exact same thing with my opposite neighbor here. Now, that is it's also a black Labrador. Actually, I even put up a video of that thing. And there is this. He has been here for a long time, and his Labrador is very old already. So you can see that it's like 12 or 13 years. It can hardly walk.
Yeah, that's probably past life expectancy.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing that he does is actually that he's the neighbor. He's really buddies with my right-hand side neighbor. Like they've known each other for a long time. And what he does is he often goes over to my right-hand side neighbor for a few beers, and that often takes I don't know how many hours. And the dog actually, he notices that his owner is just a few meters away, across the street. Then he's sitting at the gate and he starts whimpering until he comes back. And I mean, I uploaded a video with my window open, where you can see that the dog is really just opposite my window, and it's like, I don't know, I would say it's around 10 meters away. And the sound that thing makes is just absolutely unbearable. It goes right into your brain, this, and it's, I don't know, these Labradors, they are very, very loud.
They are,
because they're big, and it's not necessarily like an aggressive barking, but they are just so loud. Even the whimpering is so loud, you can hear it for about a kilometer. And really, it's just so you can really feel how your brain cells are popping when that thing is whimpering. And I have actually talked to him about that around, what was that, like 4 or 5 months ago, because he was just over there, drinking beers for, I don't know, like 3 hours. That thing was just going at it nonstop. And it really took me huge effort to actually stay calm and polite, but I just stood outside. I was just waiting for him to come back because I didn't want to go over and cause a racket. And he came, like at some point he came home, the few meters, back to his house. And I just really politely told him that, sorry, but I mean, would it be possible to find a solution for that? Because it also echoes into my place, and it's just really unbearable.
Yeah.
And then you know what his answer was? I mean, that I will never forget that.
Dogs whine, it's what they do. I'm sure it was probably one in my barking dog bingo.
Well, you can tell me in a second if that was in the bingo, but it was actually kind of a creative one. It was a new one I heard. He said that, look, well, she's already very old, and the thing is that you should have seen her 10 years ago. Like that's just like 50, or that's just like 20% of what of the racket that she caused 10 years ago. Now she's much more quiet.
Oh, jeez.
So you should be happy that you didn't live here 10 years ago, because that would have been much worse back then.
Oh man, that guy is so punchable.
And that was for him that was the case closed, and then I was absolutely speechless. And then I really thought, okay, I mean, that really makes it much better for me.
Yeah, I guess.
And the thing actually, just a few days ago, actually, it escalated. It really escalated, because we had the exact same thing again, and I just completely freaked out. And we had a huge fight in the street, and not only with him, but also his buddy, the one that he goes to visit, right next to me. He's also a dog owner. He has a German Shepherd, and he came out as well, and both their women came out as well. So it was two couples against me, and we were just at each other's throats for about, you could say, 20 minutes.
Wow.
And I was just, I mean, it was absolutely like a scene from a horror film for me, because it's just that they probably, I don't know, I mean, they probably thought, like it's four people against one, and they can just shout me down.
Yep.
But I had so much bottled up anger that it just all came out at that moment, and we were just at it for it felt like 2 hours for me. It was probably just like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something. And we went through all the stupid arguments, all the stupid points, like dogs have to bark, and they are guard dogs, and why don't you understand that? And it went so far that in the end, I mean, one of the guys, the guy next to me, he's not unreasonable. He's kind of a calm guy, but I mean, they also have this German Shepherd, which is just absolutely mentally ill. And he came up with a very weird topic, and he said that, well, I mean, you have to consider that we have been here for 30 years, and you are basically the new guy here, because I mean, he's right. I grew up in the West, in Western Europe and everything, and the Hungarians, you are in this kind of awkward situation that I mean, I am the new guy, basically. I mean, he's not wrong. And the way they see it is just that, well, you are the only one that is bothered by that, so why should we actually accommodate you?
Well, I mean, you could say, yeah, that's another thing. They say, well, if it's only, but you know what? One person is one person too many.
Right? Yeah. Well, exactly. That's how we see it, of course. I mean, that's how I see it too. But as the thing is, as soon as they come up with that argument, I mean, what do you want to say? The only thing you can say is, And I also, actually, you mentioned your work situation, right? That you work
Yep.
from home.
Yep.
And I mean, one point that ticked me really off and that I just threw into their faces straight away was the fact that I actually worked from home as well. You know, I had a home office job until February. And I had to give, I had to quit that job because it was just impossible, as you said, you know exactly what it's like.
Yep.
And I really had to quit because I just couldn't concentrate for 5 minutes
Yep.
on anything because I had to work a lot over the phone and over an online chat. And it was just not feasible. It was just absolutely not feasible. And I had to quit. It was the first reasonable job that I had here in Hungary. And then I had to quit it because of those mods. And
Jeez.
that just it's still pissing me off so much that I just threw that into their faces straight away. And I said, look, because of you and your bloody animals, I had to quit my job. And I actually will have to leave the country in the end.
God.
And then again, they just say, yeah, but I mean, you are the only one here. You're the first one who complained. Nobody has ever complained. And I said, yeah, well, that may be possible, yeah, but still there is a noise ordinance, and all of you, know exactly that you're causing an infraction of that noise ordinance, and you just don't care.
Yeah.
You just think you're in the majority, and then you can think, and then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they know exactly that also the authorities here, they're not going to do anything because they would have to punish half the street, and they're not going to do that. Or
Yeah.
they would have to punish half the town by now. And so you just stand no chance. And I just come to the conclusion that it's just not worth it, really. It's you have no other way than to
Yeah.
move away.
If you're only dealing with one, it's one thing. Yeah, you can, if you're dealing with one, you can stand your ground and fight it out. But if you're dealing with, like, if you're just surrounded by them, I think if it's, tactical, say it's like, in a military, scenario, if you're just surrounded by the enemy, maybe you just gotta, or surrender or retreat. You can't you to stand up fight, they're just going to vaporize you.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
one thing I thought too,
you can die with honor, but you will die. Yeah.
Well, the thing too is that but in this, what's interesting about that is you're talking about how that lab is, just whines the whole time he's gone. But my thing is often with a lot of these barking dog issues, even with what was just happening here, there's an animal welfare issue, which maybe isn't, our top priority. And it was the same thing with the dog that was there, last decade. I think as you commented on that video, it was the one where it was a deified Fido. That was where the dog almost got struck by lightning. But that was because often, they do that because they're not meeting the dog's needs. Like the whiny dog, and you're right, that that noise is actually worse than barking. It's like fingernails in the blackboard. It's just terrible. It's just awful. Yeah, and it's noise like that is used as a torture method.
Yeah.
But too is one thing I would say to people, and it's kind of what I said to the young woman the other day, is like, look, tend to your animal.
Yeah.
Right. Because like with your neighbor, the dog is whining the whole time because it's being neglected. The dog wants to be with her master. Right. And he abandons her and she just, carries on the whole time. It's a cause of a lot of barking and dog noise pollution. So one thing you can do is I've done this also. I try, I guess it depends if they have a sense of shame or not, but just shame them. It's like, look, your dog is doing this because you're neglecting it. Like you're a shitty dog owner. So step up and do the right thing. You know, and the thing, and that usually really catches them off balance because they'll carry on about, oh, you know, I love my, you know, Rover so much. He's like my son and all this stuff. Really? Why do you treat him like that? Why? And, you know, that, and you know, it's not our top priority. Also, it's getting authorities involved. I mean, I don't know if it's true in your case, but you know, if they really are seriously neglecting the dog, that gets attention of authorities. I mean, they don't care if the dog is torturing you to death, but if the dog is being if the dog is being neglected or mistreated, that does get the attention of not just your animal control authorities, but various, like, you know, Dogs First NGOs, like, you know, SPCA and Humane Society and all of that. So I don't know, you know, if you confront them again, that's a tactic that, you know, might work. But it's interesting, their attitude. They say, oh, yeah, well, we've lived here longer than you. I said, well, if it's the other way around, like, would you like listening to me run a chainsaw all the time? Like, would that be okay? Because I lived here longer than you. You know what I find, too, is that, yeah, it sounds like, you know, I can kind of, it's a small rural town, and people, I would say, you know, people are probably the same all over the world. It's true here also, is that people, first of all, it's a very kind of, I don't know what the term is, they're very insular, like they're very insulated. You know, everybody knows everybody else. They all went to school together, and yeah, they don't like people from the outside. They don't, you know, they don't really want to have anything to do with you. So it's true here, particularly in the U.S. If you look at the, you know, different kind of cultures throughout the United States, you know, where it's really like that, or at least used to be, is in northern New England. So, like, let's say you relocate to Vermont or Maine, some small town there, some farm town, say. Unless your grandparents went to elementary school with their grandparents, they don't want to have anything to do with you. You know, they won't really treat you badly, but it's like, forget it. You're just not going to, you know, fit in. What's interesting, too, is also rural communities have different attitudes about dogs. And that's what's interesting about not just the current across the street neighbors, but the ones that were there before with that problem dog. Is like, these folks that are here currently, they're actually new, at least new to the immediate area. They're from Keystone Heights, which is it's a small Florida farm town. So you've got, you know, it's got a 2-block downtown area with a couple of gas stations and a grocery store, maybe, like, you know, a few houses scattered around. And the rest of the homes are, like I said, they're 300 plus meters apart. It's all large properties. It's either farms or houses in the woods or whatever. And people there, you know, have a very, you know, their attitude about dogs is, it's like, oh, yeah, just let the dog out. Just let him out. Just let him do his thing or whatever. And the thing is, if you live in a place like that, you can get away with that. But in a place like this, you really can't. And I believe the prior occupants were, you know, that sort also, were basically, you know, and again, sort of like, you know, lower middle class, you know, rural people. And that's their attitude. You know, they have that sort of, but at least here, I don't have to put up with that because I've lived here a lot longer than they have. So I can say, look, everything was fine until you came here with a dog. What's up with that? You know?
That's a great advantage, actually. And
that's the thing too, is, like I said, I've been reconsidering relocating to a rural area, but if I do so, then I'd have to, you know, deal with that, you know. But I wouldn't get, I mean, I would make sure that I had a nice buffer. So if I had a dog nut neighbor there, it would be far away enough that I wouldn't really have to, you know, wouldn't bother me. So.
Yeah. Now, oh my God, there are so many points that I will have to start writing down the stuff, actually.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. Now, first of all, You mentioned actually before, I would have a question to that, that you said that your neighbors, they just, so you can just leave the dogs out, you can let them out there
Well,
and just
you
roam
can't.
them free, or?
Well, no, really, you can't. I mean, it's supposed to be, if it's outdoors, it's supposed to be either leashed or otherwise confined, like say in a fenced-in yard. And that's what I was getting
Uh-huh.
at was, yeah, that's what they do is they let them out unattended, untethered, unrestrained, they just let
All
him out.
right.
And yet he walks around, but the thing is, I mean, really, to be fair, he's a pretty laid back, I guess, good natured dog. So it doesn't really cause a problem. There
Mm-hmm.
was a few folks on, I don't know if you have Nextdoor where you are, but it's a social media app where neighbors can connect with each other. And
No,
often there's a
we
lot,
don't have that, sorry.
there's a lot of dogs, well, I'd say pet stuff, but pet really means dog, right? There's a lot of dog stuff on there.
Mm.
And a couple of people, and we don't really get much back here because also, even though we're not really in the country or in a remote area, but we're at the end of a dead end street and we back up to, a small piece of forest, right? So even though it's not the country, it kind of feels like it a little bit, particularly at this end of the block. So they let the dog out and he just kind of wanders around. And then, 5 minutes later, he comes to the door, woofs, and they let him back in, right?
Mm-hmm,
But that was the problem was they weren't letting him in promptly and he would bark. But he wanders around. Technically, they're not supposed to do that. If he wanders off property, like unrestrained, I mean, animal control will come out and cite them for that. And I've got, because I was telling you about my Ring camera system, part of it, that's far enough away that it doesn't always like trigger, but trigger a video. But I've got video of him kind of wandering, walking in the road, even wandering into my yard, my next door neighbor's yard, things like that. So technically they're in violation, but again, just to sort of keep things, peaceful around here, I didn't really see the need to escalate it. But that was the kind of thing, like if they didn't stop with the barking, I would have pounced on them, not just for the barking, but for that too, because I've got proof that they just let their dog wander the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it's not, well, technically it's not allowed, but since it's not really a problem, he's not behaving dangerously. He doesn't really go that far. Part of the thing with him too is he's morbidly obese, so he's not going to like chase anybody down or anything. He's just not. You could outrun this dog on crutches. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Technically, but that was the kind of thing I said. What had been going on? Say, well, at least up to a couple of weeks ago, didn't meet the threshold for a complaint. Mainly because animal control doesn't really do much anyway. I mean, we had 3 at-large dogs, and they didn't even live nearby. This person lived about a half a mile away. I went into some detail on this on another VC, but I'll go over it again real quick. You had the person was living in essentially a derelict home. They had 3 pit bulls that they just let run loose all the time. The pit bulls had gone to other people's properties. They had killed other pets. They'd attacked a couple on bicycles at one point. And this went on for months, right? And there's a ton of people complaining about it. Finally, the enforcement apparatus did something about it. So they were, fined $500. They have to build a fence. They have to, fence in their yard. They have to get insurance for the dogs. And if there's a few other stipulations, but that had to get, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it has to get like really bad. And there has to be a lot of people complaining about it before anything is done. So, so I didn't really make a big deal out of it. So.
Because that's interesting because that's actually the one thing that the authorities will actually really take care of here is you just can't let your dogs run loose here at all.
Oh, okay.
Like that's if anybody finds your dog running around here, then you will be actually in big trouble. And that was also
Okay.
I mean, I told that story about the Labrador, not the Labrador, the Rottweiler of that auto repair shop.
Yep. Yep.
And the problem with that really was that we actually found it outside of their premises. And that was also the reason why the police immediately started investigating them. And in the end, they got a big smack in the face.
Good.
And that was really, that's kind of the threshold. And so the dog owners here, they are, I actually had this discussion also when we had our escalation in the street, because I mentioned the fact that that it just really pisses me off that you can't go for a walk here without all these dogs, just ambushing you behind the gates and
Yep.
just threatening you. And then, one of the ladies, she said, well, I mean, why do you take it so personally? I mean, you don't have to be afraid of that. I mean, they're behind the gate anyway. And then I said, well, really? I mean, I've already met several dogs that made it out, apparently,
Yeah.
somehow. So, and then she couldn't really say anything because, I wasn't just making the stuff up. And I said, yeah, so I'm not just being paranoid or hysterical. I mean, I've already ran into dogs that were loose. Yeah. So don't tell me that this is not a problem.
Yeah.
Then she said, yeah, but I mean, our dog never escaped and everything. So yeah, bravo. Well, what point does that make? I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Well, it's just so, having all these dogs constantly, growling and snarling and aggressively barking and threatening you. It's just, why is it such, it's not a big ask to say, I don't want to live like this, right? To be constantly threatened by other people's pets. And you could say, okay, maybe most of the time the threats are empty. It's kind of like every time you walk by a house, somebody comes out waving a knife or a gun even.
Yeah.
People say,
exactly.
well, they're screaming like, die, motherfucker, die. And then they say, oh, but if the gun's not loaded, don't worry about it. You know what? That doesn't matter. I mean, it does, but it only makes it like slightly less bad. It's a constant, being screamed at, threatened, harassed. We can't, it's totally uncivilized. Can't live like this.
It's what I do is always I really try to see their perspective. I mean, that's usually what I try in such situations. And I think I've talked to so many of these now that I think I understand their perspective, but it's still a stupid perspective.
Oh
because,
yeah.
They just they really do have a different brain. I mean, I'm absolutely convinced of that. They just, and not necessarily, I'm not saying that they're stupid or anything, but their perception is just so different from ours that you can just not find any common ground. I mean, they're absolutely incapable of understanding our point. They just say, but I mean, just ignore it. That's what they say. I mean, you just ignore it. It's not personal, and they're not going to do anything. They're behind the gate, and then for them, the case is closed.
Yeah. Well,
and
again, it's a complete lack of, it's a complete lack of what they call the golden rule, like do unto others. And you tell them, it's like, how would you like it if I treated you that way? Right. Particularly with the noise pollution. It's like, okay, what would you do if I set off firecrackers all night? Because where the dog people, I mean, I don't know if people really get into fireworks where you are.
Well, I can tell you the answer. I can tell you what they would say, actually, because I've actually. But go on. Sorry, I didn't want to.
Well, anyway, because one area, it shows their hypocrisy, particularly with the noise pollution issues. Was mentioned next door earlier. Because here in the U.S., you get fireworks 2, maybe 3 days a year. New Year's Eve, maybe New Year's Day and 4th of July, Independence Day. And actually in Florida, fireworks are only legal those 3 days. Although actually like local noise ordinances can override or take precedence over that. 3 days a year, you can set off fireworks. And imagine it's like, well, why don't we just limit barking to 3 days a year?
Yeah.
But, but that's the thing is the dog people hate fireworks because dogs hate fireworks. But it's like, hey, you know what? It's like fireworks go bang. It's what they do. Just get used to it. People have these things, and if you want to live in this society, you just have to put up with it. You could just throw all the same excuses right back at them. Normally I'm generally opposed to starting a noise war. But yeah, what would these people do if you just, I don't know, got in your car and just started banging on the horn at 2 a.m? I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate that. It's like, look, the horns honk. It's what they do, right?
Yeah.
It's the horn's job.
It's the horn's job.
It's its job to honk, right?
Exactly.
Usually I recommend against doing things like that because in a lot of places, dog noise pollution is protected. Yeah, they restrict fireworks, they restrict other types of alarms, loud music, after hours construction work, and so forth. Like those will get you cited, but if the dog barks, it's like, well, yeah, that's all good. But then I think, okay, why have a noise ordinance at all when you have that kind of loophole? What's the point? Yeah, like there is no point. So, those people, they really are. I think they're totally narcissistic. They're completely self-focused and self-absorbed. And they're incapable of seeing themselves as part of a problem. You know what else? Here's another thought I had also, because I was just thinking about this the other day, and your situation may fall into this category, but I think that, or it's my observation, that these kind of problems tend to cluster. In other words, you'll have a neighborhood, some neighborhoods are relatively quiet, but you go a few blocks over and it's like, it sounds like a dog kennel at feeding time. And here's my theory. I can't prove this, but I'm confident it's the case. So you got a neighborhood that's quiet. Maybe I'll call it block busting. So you got a neighborhood that's quiet. Somebody moves in with a dog. And again, they're the totally just malicious, selfish, toxic dog owner, right? So they let the dog bark all the time. But what happens is, and do other things, run loose, harass people, whatever. But what happens is, so other dog people see that and they think, if he can get away with that, I can too. Right. So then you get more and more of them. So it like I said, it clusters because one of them sort of sets off, I don't know what you'd call it, a preference cascade of basically bad dog behavior. And that's why I think it's important that's why I got on this the other day, because I'm going to nip it in the bud. I'm going to do whatever it takes to solve the problem as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Mainly also, too, is if it starts, like with this thing, it seemed like the dog really wasn't a problem, at least not a noise problem, until very recently. I don't know what changed. I don't know what's going on with them, but I wanted to nip it in the bud because it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse, not just from them, but perhaps other people also. So I think that's why it's really important in that case. But in your case, you're just surrounded. Look, you're surrounded by the enemy. You got to retreat.
Yeah.
But that really poisonous, entitlement attitude of these people. It's like, when we're at home, we should only be listening to what we want to listen to. We should not, I don't want to listen to your stupid dog carry on all the time. Yeah. It's not a big ask. But that's the thing is, you could throw it back at them. You could say, you know what, I'm going to get a pair of refrigerator-sized speakers and, listen to AC/DC all night. Like, that's not a problem.
Well,
what do you think of that?
Now, I can tell you what they actually say when you come up with that point, because it's exactly what I said, because I still have my opposite neighbors. I told you about the first time that I tried to talk to him. Then he just said, well, it was much worse 10 years ago. She whimpered much more then, and I should be happy that I didn't live here 10 years ago. And then, when we had this escalation, I told him, look, you told me back then that 10 years ago it was much worse. Now imagine I would put up 2 huge speakers here and I would just blast music all day long. And then you came to complain to me, and you asked me to turn it down, and I would tell you that, well, you should be happy that I didn't live here 10 years ago, because then I used to listen to much more music.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
and then they just looked at me, and do you know what their response was? And that was actually, I found that pretty interesting, and that just shows the different perception. They just said, yeah, but there's a huge difference between the two things, because the music would be on purpose. You would do that on purpose. And that was the first time I heard that, actually, that they said, yeah,
so,
there's a difference because that's on purpose. But the dogs, that is basic. I mean, first of all, they cannot control the dogs. And then second, the mandatory sentence about it's the dog's job to do that. But it's not your job to listen to music.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though. Well, maybe it is your job. Maybe you're a music critic.
Yeah.
Maybe it is your job. Well, you could have said, too, it's like, you think this AC/DC is bad? Yeah, 10 years ago, I was a Kiss fan. Like, put that in your pipe and smoke it, right? Well, it's interesting. It's what they say, because, people will say, really, when you confront them, it's one of their big excuses is, dogs bark. It's what they do. But the thing is, and this all goes back to, the foundation of my narrative is the dog owners. Well, I mean, currently they're never held accountable for anything, but they need to be held accountable. The buck stops with them, and it doesn't matter if it's a dog attack or barking or a dog's crapping everywhere. They own all these outcomes. Because you could say, oh, okay, who put a gun to their heads and forced them to even own the dog in the first place? Nobody. So the thing is, when they say that, well, the dogs bark, it's what they do, or something similar, some variation of that. Essentially, they're blaming the dog, right? They're saying it's the dog's fault, but no. I mean, yeah, it's the dog's fault too, but really it's their fault for bringing the bark bag into the community. They own the outcome. But that's really the problem is, they refuse to be, and that's why we have all these problems, why we have a dangerous dog problem, why we have a barking dog problem, that's why we have a fake service dog problem, why we have a dog shit everywhere problem, is because they refuse to take responsibility, and they're never held accountable. Yeah. And that needs to change. That's the crux, but that's what they're doing is, they're just not taking responsibility. I'd say, hey, asshole, you brought that dog here. You did. You own this outcome. It's because of you that I can't work or sleep in my own home. And that sounds like a problem that you caused. That's what I did with my neighbors across the street. I sent them, I don't know if you've ever read it. I don't know if we want to go over it now. I don't really feel like diving in completely into it, but I sent them a formal desist letter, and in it I just said, consider this problem is entirely your fault. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's all your fault, all of it. Like, I've done nothing to you. But yet you have done all these things to me. You own this outcome. And I'm going to hold you accountable for it, whatever the damages are, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's the problem. That's what they're doing. It's what your neighbors are doing also. They're just skating responsibility. It's like, the dog barks. I say it's his job. Like, who hired him to do that? Mm-hmm. Who did that? I mean, didn't they use that excuse at Nuremberg and it didn't fly?
Yeah.
Remember that? Didn't
It's,
most of those Nazis get hung? Didn't they hang them anyway, and deservedly so?
yeah.
You know, oh, I was just doing my job. And
Yeah.
sorry, it doesn't work. And again, who gave them that job, right?
Yeah.
So even if you can't, I mean, a dog, you know, and it also goes against their narrative. They go, dogs are super smart and are super sentient. And you vlogged about that too. It's like, no, they're dumb as bricks. A dog, you know, a dog is not a moral actor. Yeah, he doesn't understand the repercussions or the consequences of what he's doing, but the owner does, or they should know. They should know, particularly after they've been spoken to about. Right. It's just, yeah, it's just totally rude. And it's like we talked about this last time. They're totally antisocial. Dog culture is per se antisocial because they refuse to be held accountable for anything, which means that literally they're not fit to live in a society, period. You know, I mean, if we were to rebuild society from ground up, I mean, if you're going to allow people to own dogs or own pets at all, right, you know, the stipulation is, and I think this is the way it used to be, it was understood that if you brought an animal into a community, you owned whatever outcomes were related to it, right? And they're all for, they'll give the dog credit if it kind of sort of looks like it did something useful, but or brave or whatever. And dogs aren't capable of bravery either. But yeah, they're totally, you know, antisocial because they refuse to be held accountable, which means they're just not fit to live in society. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is here that you know, from their perspective, you know, I'm playing devil's advocate here all the time. But here, you know, if you saw our street, then. And if you asked these dog owners, then they would consider themselves highly, you know, social, because they're of course social with all the other dog owners. You know, like 70% of the street has a dog, and so then they would just look at you and they would say, "What do you mean I'm antisocial? I mean, but these people are all my friends and we all get along perfectly." And then here you're actually, you know, it's. If you don't have a dog, then you are the absolute exception, and you are considered the weirdo. You know, you are considered you are probably antisocial, and you're probably an animal hater, and then you probably hate people as well, and etc. etc. You know, and I think, yeah, I mean, how do you want to fight against that? I mean, it's just.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're anti. I mean, just because you're sure antisocial people can be friends with each other. Hey, I'm sure a lot of these, like, you know, Nazi concentration camp guards, you know, went out for beers after throwing people into ovens or whatever.
Absolutely,
you know, I'm sure they were. You know,
absolutely.
They, you know, slave owners in the Old South. You know, it's it's probably, and there's, you know, I don't mean to just pick on certain groups of people. There's probably an example of that from every culture if you go back far enough. But yeah, you know, it's like, you know, noise polluting. And that's the other thing too, is they're all full of shit. Everybody knows, like I was discussing earlier, that noise pollution is a problem. Everybody knows it, and we've known it for a long time. Like one factoid that, you know, I learned back when I first got into this space was that, you know, back during the Roman, or even before the Empire, the Roman Republic, they would limit travel at night because of horses' hooves and the wagon wheels would on the cobblestones, because they, you know, cobblestone would wake people up at night. And that was a problem. So even ancient civilizations knew this was a problem.
Yeah, that's true. I read that too, actually.
Yeah. So
they were pretty strict on that, the Romans.
Yeah. And, you know, and some people, maybe the barking dog really doesn't bother them. But I could say, hey, you know, AC/DC at 200 decibels doesn't bother me either, you know.
Yeah.
It was interesting too. You talk about the prior across the street neighbors. One time I was here, and it even disrupt my social life. We're having a Scrabble match one night with some friends, and actually this was after they'd gotten rid of the dog that was in that video, the one that almost got struck by lightning. Actually, they'd gotten rid of him. They had another dog, but the replacement dog was way quieter because, again, I think they kept him inside most of the time. So all of a sudden, we're just sitting there, and we're drinking wine, playing Scrabble, chilling out. We hear gunfire.
Oh.
So they're in their backyard shooting guns, and again, that's not appropriate in a neighborhood like this either. So I was like, okay, so I call the cops, the police come out. Because I told them, because I said, you know what? Because I was done with them. I said, every little thing you do from now on is going to escalate. Everything. And dog related or not, I don't care. Finally, they moved out after that because I guess they were just tired of me just like being on their shit all the time. So the police came and they didn't get into a lot of trouble, but they just gave them a warning. They said, okay, if you want to shoot your guns, you got to go to a range. You can't do stuff like this in a neighborhood like this because there's stipulations for backyard ranges also. And like I told, so then they actually sent a lot of people out. They sent, because they heard gunfire. I guess they thought maybe there was like people were being murdered or something. So they sent a whole thing. But so anyway, and when they were leaving, I did talk to the one, police sergeant. And he was really cool. He was very civil and very polite. And I said, look, officer, I shoot guns too, but I go to a range and I don't pay $400 a year in gun club dues so I can fucking come home and listen to gunfire. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, I totally hear you. He's like, absolutely. And he said, yeah, if it happens again, call us and we'll come back out. And, next time, he said, this time we just warned them. Next time, they're getting a ride downtown. I'm like, cool. Thanks for helping out. But then what they did was then after the police left, they put their dog out and it started barking.
Yeah.
I'm like,
revenge.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, with the new neighbors, they're just, I don't know what's going on over there. Maybe they're just getting into drugs or something, or they have some other problem. But the prior ones, this was this noise pollution stuff. This was intentional. This was not a question of somebody just being, careless and lazy. This was intentional. Because what they did was, they tied those dogs up, right across the street from my house because their side yard is right in front of me. Now, when it first came up, I said, look, could you maybe put your dogs behind the house so the noise, like it kind of blocks the noise, will kind of, because they back up to the woods also. The noise will be deflected in that direction. And they're like, no. So it was intentional. But with them, it was intentional. They're using their dogs to harass and torment people, me in particular. It's not just, it's just, they weren't just being, useless and lazy. It was intentional. I think it's intentional on the part of many of them. They like it. Because they know it, they know, and noise is that kind of noise is really bad for your body. I mean, it causes your blood pressure to go up. It wreaks havoc with your, endocrine system. I've had many people tell me that when they had the barking dog issue, their blood pressure went really high. But then when it was resolved, it returned to normal.
Yeah.
And, high blood pressure kills. Which means that barking kills.
Yeah,
let me ask you something too. Like in your neighborhood, your jurisdiction, do they restrict other pets? Like, I don't know, if you wanted to have a pet elephant, would they let you do that?
No. No. I mean, there are Yeah, it's really. I think that's pretty similar. You know, in the US and here that there are loads of regulations for other pets. You know,
Yep.
I mean, you cannot have any. For instance, if you wanted to have, if you are into snakes or something, and you wanted to have like venomous snakes or any other kind of, you know, like I don't know, probably scorpions. Yeah, whatever, then it would be pretty complicated, and
Yep.
there would be loads of restrictions, and it would you could probably not even get a permit. You know, they would just say no, and that's it.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
not you don't have a big chance. You know, or
Yeah.
you just do it illegally, like many people, of
Well,
course, would
probably
do here.
something, but the thing is, like, snakes, or like if I had a pet rattlesnake inside the house, nobody would know it. I mean, if that's the thing, is like owning a dog
Yeah,
is possible to do covertly, mainly because of the
exactly.
noise pollution issue. But many of these other animals, you can, particularly you talk about, yeah, like snakes or scorpions or lizards or whatever, you could probably do that covertly. And it's like, yeah, if you
Hmm.
don't know. But actually, a while back, and I was doing, as part of doing due diligence for this work, was, and well, actually, what brought it up was because of course, like we discussed the last time you were on, the whole pit bull breed specific legislation, political
Hmm.
war just continues to rage. There's some, I don't know, some city in Missouri wants to lift their pit bull ban. Like, it
Mm.
works because they never enforce these things. I mean, seriously, most of these pit bull bans are about as effective as a screen door in a submarine. I mean, they're a complete joke. They're useless. Not that it's a bad idea, because I bring that up, and I blogged about this last decade. I don't know if I was the first person to make this point or not, but it was when, because Miami, Florida has a pit bull ban, or had, and again, the dog nutters are endlessly trying to get that ban repealed.
Hmm.
They try to put it on public ballot, lawsuits, and it's endlessly trying to get the ban repealed, which again doesn't really matter because they have pit bulls everywhere anyway. Like I said, it's about as effective as a screen door in a submarine. But one issue they try to bring up is, well, they say it's racist and fascist and bigoted and unconstitutional and blah 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 blah,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But I know if I was the first person to bring it up, and I said, well, really? Like, I can't have like goats or sheep in my suburban backyard. They're
Hmm.
zoned out farm animals. You need to, relocate to a farm if you want an animal like that. And I said, what's the
Hmm.
constitutionality of that? Nobody complains about that. Or cat restrictions. Because I did some due diligence on, say, if I wanted a large cat, like say a mountain lion or a tiger, what would I have to do, right?
Hmm.
Because that's what these people are doing. They're saying, like, look, we dog people have an absolute unconditional right to own any kind of dog we want, period,
Yeah.
right? That's the argument they're making. Of course, again, I like cats. So I said, okay, if I were to get, say, a pet mountain lion or tiger, and again, doing that covertly would be pretty difficult. Also, what could I just do that? The answer is, it's not just no, it's like an unqualified F no. So I found out what I would have to do is, here's what I have to do. I would have to get a zoo permit from the state of Florida. I
Hmm.
would have to get a variance from the county, the local jurisdiction. And
Yeah.
variances are not easy to get. Among other things, what you have to do is, I know this is the way it worked in New Jersey, but I'm pretty sure the way it works here, essentially, yeah, you have to go to the county executives and beg for it. And one of the
Hmm.
stipulations is you need every like adjacent property has to agree to it. So in other words, what they do is they'll hold a hearing, they'll
Oh,
convene a hearing,
yeah.
and they'll say, okay, and well, the way it works is if somebody objects, if any of your neighbors, immediate neighbors object, you can't do it. The variance
Hmm.
gets thrown out. That's one of the stipulations. So the variances are very, very difficult to get. So I need a zoo permit, a variance. I also have to build a pen or an enclosure to certain standards. It has to meet or exceed certain standards. And of course, I can't just, throw a leash on it, walk it around the block. So really, for practical purposes, it's impossible to do. But yeah, but again, it's this big doggy loophole where, yeah, they can own all these other animals are restricted as hell, but dogs aren't at all. You've got this one thing that's totally unrestricted. It's completely unbound, and people can just do whatever they want. And that's and not only that, not only can they own it, but they're not accountable for anything the animal does, even though they brought it into the community. Another vlog I put up was because I wanted to, juxtapose, like do a fair side-by-side comparison of how, for example, if the family pet, say, kills a kid or a family member, how is that treated when it's either a dog versus a non-dog? Yeah. Well, if it's a dog, there's no charges. Everybody has sympathy for the other family members. It was an unavoidable accident. Nobody could have predicted it would happen, even if the dog had attacked people before. And they get a ton. Well, you did a video on the GoFundMe scams. Yeah, they get a ton of GoFundMe money, and everybody's bawling their eyes out. They're even crying over the dogs. They said, "Oh, yeah, Fido and Rover had to get put down. How sad, But then I compared that, and it was a case here in Florida where a family had, I think it was a python. It was some big snake. And we've talked about those too, we have a problem with those also. But the python, the family snake, killed a kid, killed their kid. They got 12 years in prison. 12 years. And of course, probably the best thing anybody could say was, well, maybe they should have only gotten 5, right? Maybe punishment was excessive, but you see the vast difference in how these things are handled. And going back to what we're talking about, noise pollution also, it's like, if you were to listen to AC/DC I guess, do you have a noise ordinance? Like, how's that written? Do you know?
Yeah, well, we have it. On paper, everything exists. Yeah. But that's also something that I noticed in Hungary. On paper, we are a totally civilized country.
Sure.
But only on paper. So now there is a very detailed noise ordinance, and actually I even read through parts of it, and the first paragraph in it says that you as a house owner, or whatever, if you're in an apartment or house, and as you said, I think you said it in the beginning, basically the place you live is your refuge. Yeah. And you have the right, the legal written right, in your refuge you have peace and you have quiet. Yep. No matter what's going on, no matter what. Yeah. It's very short and very clear. Yep. So, and other thing, I think it's this 4th or 5th paragraph, is that if somebody has a pet, then they are legally obliged to keep that pet in a way that nobody else is bothered. Yeah. It's also very clear, like, I'm not, I didn't go to law school, and like, I'm not the most educated person, but even I understood that. And, these two things, it's really among the first 5 paragraphs, like, these two things are absolutely not enforced at all. At least on paper, it's there. So congratulations.
Yeah, does it stipulate any penalties? For example, if there's an infraction, does it?
Yeah. Actually, it does. Yeah. Now with the noise pollution, for instance, like, even my parents actually told me that like, I don't know, 15, 20, 50 years ago, it actually did happen that the authorities, they took people's dogs away. Yeah. Really, they had you know, a noise problem, a barking problem, and then the authorities, I mean, you got the warning usually, I mean,
Yeah.
out of fairness, and said, look, I mean, like 3 of your neighbors have complained, so just find a solution. If people keep complaining, and we will take your dogs away, and will, you know, they will either be, I mean, probably not euthanized, I mean, if they're not dangerous, but they would be put in a shelter, and then somebody else would get them. And that's what the authorities did, apparently, you know, decades ago. And they really took people's dogs away. I mean, that's just not happening anymore at all. You know, like, I mean, your dog really would have to probably kill people until the authorities would actually resort to these measures now, you know, that they really take them away. Yeah. But that just doesn't happen anymore. But again, on paper, yeah, that's, it all exists. The laws are all there. They're just not being enforced.
Yeah, they're not being enforced. That's a really big problem in this space. You know, what's ironic about that is that, well, it's another one of their, you know, circular logic fails, because here, I know you have the same kind of thing here in a lot of cases, although here, there's a thing with the United States is that the corruption is very deep and very complicated. So what they do often is, and actually I petitioned, actually agitated against a quote anti-barking law. And you're probably thinking, like, why would Uncontrol oppose an anti-barking law? Because again, the law was written in such a way to protect noisy dogs.
No.
Right, not to go after them, because what they do is they, we'll have a noise ordinance, but actually, and the law did not pass, which is a good thing. Like I said too, sometimes, you know, agitating or getting involved, you know, civically can produce results, and I consider that one of my wins, because here's what it is, what they do, and they do this in a lot of places, is they'll have a noise ordinance for everything except dogs. And then they'll have the barking dog law that stipulates that usually they'll have a multiple household rule. So they need multiple complainants about the dog, usually 3 different parties. And usually it's like good luck getting that to happen. And they'll have a consecutive disruption law. And so what they did was they wanted the 3 household rule. And the thing is like, what if you live in a place where it's like, okay, you only have one close neighbor and the dog is barking. Nobody else is even really going to be bothered by it. And that was a point I made to them. I said, what other law is enforced this way? Like, if your car gets stolen, do they say, well, we need 2 other people to like go sign the complaint? No other law. And I said, look, you know, we're United States citizens protected by the Constitution. We have a right to equal protection. We have a right to due process. It's not only the offenders that have a right to due process. We do also. Okay. We have, we pay taxes. That means that we have a right for authorities to take action when something like this happens. It shouldn't take an act of Congress to get something done. But that's what happens is, they try to. So really, the anti-barking law is really a pro-barking law. So that went down in flames, and justifiably so. And of course, you see it too, like again with our dog bite prevention week. I mean, it's not really a legal matter, but really it should be called dog cult promotion week, because that's what it's really about. But that's why you always got to read these things, find, carefully and really think about, okay, what is this thing really about? So, yeah, I tell you, I definitely feel for you, man. It's terrible. It really is. Yeah, well. It really is, And I guess it's probably the best thing is just to get out of there. But you got to wonder too, is that, or anybody, and there's been, since I've been blogging and even now vlogging, I've encountered a ton of people who are literally barked out of their homes. literally.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing should not happen in a society. It's like the dog owners need to be held accountable. And you know what? Like, not to give credit where credit's due. Plenty of people are able to keep a dog in a way that's not, does not place a burden on others. And that's what I would tell some of these other people too. It's like, look, I've known plenty of dog people that weren't complete assholes like you are. Could you be like them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I brought up the same argument. I mean, I phrased it a little bit nicer than you just did.
Yeah. Look, I'm from New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey. I got to put things in those terms. So.
All right. It's good to know. Good to know. But yeah, I brought up that same argument, and because I lived in different countries, and it's not that in those other countries people didn't have dogs. I mean, they just had dogs just like the people here. But it was never a problem. So I was just asking myself, like what was actually the difference? I mean, it's not that suddenly I just got really sensitive and I became a Karen, in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
But I also told that to when we had this huge escalation here. And then, they were just going on about, yeah, but, they always come with this guard dog argument.
Oh,
yeah, but they have to bark because, there are all these burglaries and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then I said, yeah, but, and that was the point then actually when I realized that we are just turning in circles. Because then I said, the other places I lived, people had guard dogs too. It was the exact same setting. You had one house next to the other, had a dog sitting behind the gate. It was dead quiet. So what exactly is the difference? And those were guard dogs too.
Yeah, well, those were
probably.
Yeah, those were legit guard dogs. I mean, I'm not the whole guard dog concept is totally outdated if it ever made sense, but the thing is, I mean, they're false alarms. Like your dog, the dog is literally barking at nothing. And even like with your neighbor and with mine too, your dog is barking at you. Are you the burglar?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Think about that. What crime is in progress? You know, it's just, again, it's false. So what would they do to somebody? Imagine if you're in a building like a school or a library, an office building, and somebody's just pulling the fire alarm every 15, 20 minutes because they're bored. How long would they get away with that? Probably once, and then they would be carted off someplace. So, but that's, they basically everything the dog does is they're trying to justify it. And it's all circular. They're like, well, they say that like they make really great, burglar alarms or whatever. But a burglar alarm, a proper one, only goes off when there's an actual burglar or something going on. I told you about my Ring camera system, and it's not really a burglar alarm per se. It's just a, monitor. It's, it's passive monitoring, but I can have it chime if, my phone chime if something moves outside. I've got a record of everything that happens, which again is very, very useful in a lot of cases. It's, it's not expensive, and it's totally unoffensive and non-obtrusive. Like, it doesn't violate the rights of anyone else, which is the key thing. Because you know what? It's like, you have a right to secure your space, but it's also incumbent on everyone to do so in a way that doesn't violate the rights of others, right? Because you could argue the same thing. It's like, well, what do you think? Well, I'm sure this would be a problem where you are, and it would be a problem where I am. It's like, you know what? To scare off the burglars, I'm going to, like, every 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to run out my front yard. I'm going to scream bloody murder for a couple of minutes and then fire like my .357 Magnum in the air a couple of times. Just to keep the bad guys away. That wouldn't be tolerated. That would not be tolerated. Again, they do what they did to my other neighbors that time. The police might tell me once to knock it off, and then I would be hauled away. But if it's a dog doing it, it's okay.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And you just, like if you have this discussion with them, you're just not getting anywhere.
No,
You know,
no.
there's this, I had this exact discussion with them, and then, one of the women actually, I really had to laugh when she actually said that. Then she just said, when I mentioned that, in the places where I lived before, they had dogs as well, and it was dead quiet. Then she said, yeah, but these dogs, they were probably all locked inside of the house. Then I said, I mean, her name is Judith. And I said, Judith, I mean, I'm sorry, but I have lived in those places, and I don't think you have to explain to me, where the dogs were.
Yeah.
I saw exactly where the dogs were, so you have not lived there, so don't explain to me the
Yeah. Well,
conditions. Like,
they're just a
that's just
bottomless
ridiculous.
pit, just an endless like vomit of excuses out of these people. I wonder if
Yeah.
I could find like, let me see if I can get a share going. Hang on a minute. I want to just stand by and find, where's my I want to find my barking dog bingo card. I don't know if they play bingo where you are. Let's see. It's not there. Let me just go to my blog real quick. This was a long time ago. Yeah, because what I did was I made a bingo card out of all the excuses they make. And usually if you can get a line across or down, you can, then you win. You win your barking dog bingo game. So I think I did that. Let me find it. Just bear with me for
Sure,
this
no worries.
this is funny. You'll love. You might even work. I mean, it's in English, but let's see. April, May. Let's see, June. Oh, here it is. All right. I'm gonna get a share going. Hold on. Let me see if you can see this. Let's see. Share screen. I want to share. I think it's this. Yeah. Okay. Start sharing. Let me know. Can you see this? My blog, which says animal control, uncontrolled.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I see it.
So here's what I did was I wrote this because I was getting into, these are all the excuses they use. So you can see, like, from left to right, dogs bark. It's what they do. It's a watchdog, like I said.
Yeah.
And my dog has a right to express himself. I can do whatever I want, my property. Pointing fingers. What about noise pollution from other sources?
Yeah.
These other, he is
excellent.
his job. He was provoked. This is the country. That's another one. Yeah, I did this. This is almost 11 years ago. I wrote this. And, other things. So, they claim that you want the government to take over everything. You're too sensitive. Get a life.
Yeah.
So I said too, it's like, so the game rules, give them, the yapper owner, local SPCA or AC a call, and, make sure, print off a copy, print this off, and for each, excuse they make, mark off that square. So if they tell you it's a watchdog, it's like, okay, so you mark this off, right? And you say, okay, what else do you got to say? And they say, well, I can do whatever I want my property. So you mark that off. So if you get, if you mark them all across or down, bingo, we win, And I forwarded this too, is when people, particularly in various forums, when people make these excuses. I've actually done this. It's like, wow, you got me. We're like 4 across. Just one more, and I win. And they're like, because we're just telling us, like, look, we're wise to your BS. Now, of course, you can do that. There's also, you can play the barking dog, right? So every time they make one of these excuses, you take a shot, right?
Oh, brilliant.
So
fantastic.
So
that's great.
That's
great.
Yeah. So I mean, you could probably probably pretty easy to translate this into Hungarian or whatever language. If you're in France, you could convert it to French or whatever, and say, here, like, look, like, I'd actually seriously, like, it seems like, the neighbors I got across the street now are they're okay. But if they'd started this, I probably would have just gone back over there with a copy of this and said, or even go to authorities. It's like, look,
Yeah.
the point, what I'm expressing here is all these excuses are bullshit. All of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of them. And you know what? We're wise to it. This was part of, I actually wrote a series of blogs, basically taking and sort of decomposing all these excuses, right? Like dogs bark, it's what they do. Actually, I should probably update that because I've had more thoughts on the issue in the interim. But yeah, what they're doing here is, in the upper left, they're basically blaming the dog. They're saying, well, it's a dog being a dog. But it's like, look, you brought the dog into the neighborhood. You did, and you failed to control it, which makes it a you problem. You got to fix it. Either shut him up or get rid of him. Okay, and as you pointed out, plenty of people are able to. I mean, at this point, I'm just like totally against dogs in the community. I wish I could push a button and make them disappear. Yeah. But the fact is, to be completely fair, plenty of people own dogs and keep them in a way that's not, grossly offensive to others. So, but yeah, all these say, hey, you might want to, you could convert this to Hungarian and send it to them. It's like, the point is, we know you're full of shit. And sometimes they even start this stuff. I'm like, you know what? Don't even go there with me. I'm not hearing that. It's just I'm not even going to debate it anymore. It's all BS. So yeah, hopefully get into a place where, it's better. And like I said, it seems to cluster. So it seems like you're in a cluster of people who are all, and that's what they're doing is they're all kind of, they're reinforcing each other. I don't know what you would call the dynamic, but like I said, the problem seems to cluster.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, that's actually funny that you say that, because that's a huge coincidence now, because I have actually made a video that will go online tomorrow. So it's it's finished already, but it'll go online tomorrow. And that is actually exactly about these cluster problems. And I have a very weird theory about that. But, I don't know. Perhaps people will think I'm crazy or so. But I don't know if you have. You said that you brought that example. That imagine you have a street or just a neighborhood that is quiet, and then you just need one person. You need one inconsiderate wanker to come in with his mutt, and then what are the others going to think? You would probably have somebody who said, yeah, well, I mean, I've always wanted a dog actually, and now this other guy is there, and his dog is barking all the time and nobody cares, so I might as well just go ahead and finally get the dog, and then you get this chain reaction.
Reaction.
And a few years later, you will have exactly what we have here. You have 70% of people who probably have one.
Yep.
And there's an interesting theory. You've probably heard about that. It's the broken window theory.
Well, yeah, broken window. Yeah.
Yeah. So I made a video about that. I tried to kind of connect these two things, because I think you could actually apply this broken window theory also to noise. It's not just about vandalism or kind of crime, but I think it's the exact same process that is happening with noise. If you have basically a quiet neighborhood and then somebody gets this cycle going, and it will actually escalate pretty quickly then. And you can, as you said in the beginning, you have to kind of stop it right when the problem is still small.
Yep.
You have to. What did you say? You have to nip it in its bud, or
nip it in the bud. Yeah,
nip it in the bud with your neighbor. Yeah.
Yeah, nip. Well, it kind of goes back to, it's like, a flower starts with a bud, but if you nip the bud, it won't blossom
Exactly.
fully.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I guess that's where the metaphor, comes from. But I think it too is, even if it doesn't set off like the chain reaction or the domino effect or whatever you want to call it, still, I think the longer it goes on, the harder the problem's going to be to solve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, let's say you get a neighbor gets a puppy for their kids and it becomes a nuisance. The longer they have the dog, the harder it's going to be to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, because particularly if they get the dog from a breeder, often, legit breeders will take the dog back, if it doesn't work out. Sometimes, rescues do that also. So probably the sooner it's dealt with, the better, before it becomes sort of embedded, and the longer they get away with it, they're like, then, they're used to it, and it sort of becomes the new normal. And that was why with this thing over here, I did not want this dog barking all the time to be just, a fixture here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let that happen. So, yeah, and it's a good idea. So yeah, I look forward to that video coming.
Yeah, well, I don't know, but yeah. I mean, I think it really is exactly like you said, and you really have to take care of that at the beginning, and you need people to speak out against that, because I mean, here you exactly see where it is going to end if nobody does. If you just let it slide forever, then what you will get in the end is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah,
and,
it's just totally intolerable. It's just it's like it's unlivable. I mean, it's unlivable.
You have to be a vegetable, to live to live here, and yeah, exactly. When I look at the sheets that at the bingo card that you shared, then I've heard all of these, from them, every single one of them. And now when you actually let the thing slide for a long time, then they will of course say, that, well, it hasn't been bothering anyone else, it has been like that for 10 years now, and why are you the first one now complaining? And yeah, of course they have a point. Yeah.
Well, a
But
lot of it too
it's
is that's
just
even assumed. Well, the thing too is dog nutters lie. So I would not. I mean, I guess it's possible that nobody's complained, but that's another one of those things. I don't know if it's on here, but it's that it's like on the left, the second from the top. It's not bothering anyone else,
exactly,
or nobody's complained. They don't know that. Right. First of all, they don't know that. And even if they've been complained to, they're not going to be like, oh, yeah, like 12 people complained about Fido. They're not going to admit to that. Or very few of them would. I always assume that they're lying. I don't believe anything they say because, usually, particularly like with really any dog person I just assume the worst. So I wouldn't believe that. And a lot of it, but one person is one too many. It doesn't need to offend. What is it got to like? What does everybody on Earth have to be offended or damaged by this dog before they do something? They do the same thing with dangerous dogs. It's like a dog attacks somebody, and they're like, "Well, it was just a one-off thing, and it only one person went to the hospital. It's not that big a deal." But then it attacks somebody else, and somebody else, and that gets into it's like most of these. Are repeat offenders. And a dog attacking one person is one too many. That's a theory behind BSL, is that these, breed specific restrictions is that some of these murder mutts, they don't get one chance to screw it up. So banning pit bulls means, okay, we kick them all out. But what it doesn't mean, or should not mean, is that every other dog in creation gets an unlimited number of free passes. No. What it means is that the rest of them get one chance to get it right. I'm talking more about dangerous dogs now than noisy dogs. But if a dog sends somebody to the hospital, it's done. It's over. As far as that's the paradigm I would promote or support. But now, they don't do that. As they want to get into, anti-barking spaces. And when I first got into, even before I started blogging, I'd go to these, there's a few anti-barking forums. And unfortunately, even that stuff, they're just infested with dog cultists. Yeah. But I'd say, look, it's like you're trying to think about how difficult it is to deal with a barking problem when dogs are literally killing kids and nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right? Or almost nobody. So if you can't, because that's what I would do is I would bring up sometimes, a dangerous dog issue. Often it would get me banned. I say, oh no, all we care about is barking. But I said, okay, dog barking, dog attacks, service dog fraud, dog shit everywhere. What do all those things have in common? And it's not a trick question. I mean, well, this is, they're all dog related. They're all dog owner related. Okay. And these things happen because dogs and dog owners almost always get a pass, regardless of what it is. Whether it's, bringing dogs where they don't belong, dogs attacking people, dogs noise polluting, whatever, terrible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Terrible.
So yeah, it's just it's. And I have. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just I've just basically as you said like about half an hour ago. At some point, you just can't fight against it anymore. If you are basically really on your own against an entire street, then it's just pointless. And also, I don't even consider it necessarily as kind of a disadvantage or anything. Like, I see it from that perspective that I actually, I'm very lucky that, I can move away. I mean, I can go to another country. I can go to, in fact, to any country I want in Europe. I mean, that's a right that we have. And, these poor little dog owners here, I mean, they all have to stay here. Because they, like, all of them are, as the other guy said, we have been here for 30 years. I mean, that is true. And, you can consider that an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage because it also means that you're so rooted there that you can't go away anymore.
Yeah.
So you have to stay there, and they have to stay in this little, I don't want to say shithole, but in this little bubble. They can't get out of that. I mean, they have a house, they have a family, they have the dog that they can't leave alone and everything, and they're totally unflexible.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, then look, I don't have to stay here. I mean, you just stay here and you just eat each other then.
Yeah.
Because at some point they will, at some like the conflict is they will also have conflicts among themselves if they carry on like that.
Oh yeah, that it does, and it's interesting is because when you take a space like this, and I raise this issue often, is particularly if you take, a group of people, dog owners in this case, who are sort of granted some kind of immunity, they can just do whatever they want with no restraint, like say noise pollute in this case. It's inevitable that first of all they wreck everything around them, but they go after each other too. And you see that a lot in this space. I think you mentioned last time that, pit bulls have not really caught on in your country, but they may, because the big conflict, and the sort of, I call it, it's like a civil war. It's an internecine, which means sort of an internal conflict. And there's actually multiple of them, and the biggest one, though, is this pit bull problem. Because what's the breed purpose of a pit bull? The breed purpose of a pit bull is to attack and kill other dogs.
Yeah.
And that's why many dog people don't like them. So, they could say, look, it's the dog's job to bark. So somebody... Maybe, somebody from the United States relocates to that neighborhood with the 3 murder mutts, and that dog literally those dogs just lay waste to that neighborhood,
Yeah.
you'd say, hey, look, they're pit bulls. It's
It's their
literally
job.
their job, because
Yeah.
they were, they were bred for a purpose. They're working dogs. That's their, I mean, that's the excuse before. It's your dog's job to bark. And
Yeah.
if I'm the pit bull person, and it's my dog's job to rip your dogs to shreds.
Yeah.
There you go. Right?
Exactly.
Fido just did his job, literally.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing. Yeah, they're going to get what goes around. I don't know if you have that saying in Europe.
Yeah.
They're saying what goes around comes around, and they're going to get theirs. And part of it too is just what they're doing to themselves. Because again, this noise pollution is really bad for your body, even if you don't really appreciate it. You can say, listen to Fido carry on really doesn't bother me, and they're sincere. It bothers you because those health effects I was talking about, these are, sort of autonomous, reflex kind of reactions.
Yeah.
So yeah, their blood pressure is going up. It's damaging their heart. It's damaging their kidneys. It's raising their risk, among other things. I'm just off the top of my head. It's raising their risk of stroke, of raising the risk of heart attack. It's raising the risk of kidney failure, among other things. That is what this is doing to them. And it's like, you know what? If they only did it to themselves, that would be one thing, but they don't. They inflict it on others, and they should not be allowed to do that. But yeah, you're right. They're going to get theirs, and they are kind of stuck. Particularly the dog thing makes them kind of stuck. Because one of them says, you know what? I'm going to live the dream. I'm going to relocate to Florida, United States. And they get a house in this neighborhood. And not just me, because even many of my other neighbors, we sort of have a loose network of people, because we're sort of the same thing, but almost in reverse, that people here go after people like that. It's not just me.
No,
and
really?
I'm going to go after them. And I told you, it's part of, our common law legal system that noise polluting is an actionable tort, meaning they can be sued and forced to pay damages, among other things. So it's like, nice car you got there. Be a shame if you lost it, because you can, if you win a lawsuit and get a judgment, you can execute, you levy bank accounts, dock paychecks, seize other property, like say vehicles. The only thing you can't do is in Florida, the primary home is protected. So I can't, unfortunately, well, it depends if the house is rented, but they're renting. But it's like, go somewhere else. I guess, they've got a cluster. They've got their own little community of dog douchebags. But one of them leaves. Try to take that shit somewhere else where they don't put up with that stuff. Might be in for a rude awakening. And they could say, whoa, yeah, where I'm from, we did that. It's like, well, not here. And it kind of a little bit what happens here you get a little bit of that with these neighbors. It's like, look, this isn't Keystone Heights. The houses are not a quarter of a mile apart. You can't just let your dog out. Now, I never raised that as an issue, but I might. If the barking becomes an issue, then I'm going to kind of throw the whole thing against the wall as a package deal.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to let that go as long as there's no other problems. But it's like, really, you can't do that here, because the houses aren't, a quarter mile apart. And I've lived here for 13 years. I've been here, and the neighborhood was fine until you came here with a mutt. So what are you going to do about it? And I can go after you. I'll find a way to get, here's the other thing, find out. It's like, and if you dig into my blog, I don't mean to come in and talk tough and all that stuff, but, people, at least in our legal system, actually have been sued and forced to pay damages because of barking. And of course, in other dog-related problems, like dog attacks and so forth. But you know, they can be got. I mean, the legal system is stacked in their favor, but they're not invincible. It's not airtight protection. I need to know that. So yeah, what goes around comes around, and they'll all get theirs at some point. You know, even whether if it's just in a diminished life, as you noted, they can't really go anywhere. You know, the mutt is like a giant. It's like a ball and chain or an anchors.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. I really try to see it from that side, you know, that I'm really lucky that, you know, I can move to any German speaking country. I could move to an English speaking country. I could even move to a French speaking country, and you know, they all can't, you know, they're all stuck here, and yeah, at some point they can just eat each other. I don't care. and you know, that's also something that bothered me quite a bit, because when we had this escalation in the street, you know, there is always this. I mean, you wouldn't have that in the United States, but in Europe, you know, we have these. We have a particular. Well, how can I say? You know, there are loads of refugees here, and you know, people who actually fled from one country to another within Europe. You know, and you know, just like my family. And the funny thing is, you know, in the end, they all have the same problem. You know, they're often not really at home where they fled to, but either are they really at home in the country where they came from.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but
no,
you know,
it does. It does. Yeah.
It's you often have that situation, you know, that in Switzerland, for instance, you know, people were often saying that, you know, like these are the Hungarians, you know, like to my family, like they are the Hungarians. And when we are in Hungary, then here in Hungary, people say, you know, these are, you know, the Swiss, you know, these kind of half Hungarians, and they're more like Swiss. So, and you're often not really accepted in any of the two places.
Yeah.
Because and you have that here as well. And they actually tried to use that as an argument. That was so funny that they, like one of the guys said, yeah, well, I mean, you know, you have to understand that, I mean, you didn't grow up here, and I mean, you grew up in Western Europe, and I mean, we understand that, you know, things are different there, but you also have to show you also have to show a little bit of respect, because you know, we all stayed here, and you know, we actually endured this communist regime, and I mean, you just have to understand that you cannot just talk down to people like that.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? Yeah, they're playing like it's a version of the oppression card, but my response to something like that is, I don't care what you went through, right? I don't care if you like survived the Titanic disaster. It's like, it does not give you the right to you know, essentially trample other people's rights. Okay. Yeah. It's because two wrongs don't make a right. You know, yeah, it's unfortunate that you had to deal with that, even firsthand. But yeah, it does not give you a right to just shit all over random people. Because you know what? Everybody's got a story. I mean, some people have, I guess, more of an enchanted life than others, but everybody's got a story, you know. So yeah, that's another like excuse. You know, that doesn't hold up. The thing is that they know what they're doing is wrong, but they'll just never admit it.Maybe not even to themselves. So yeah, it's interesting what you said about like relocating and so forth, because it was a book that I never read. But the title of it was, I think, you can't. What is it? You can't go home again. Let me see what that is. I believe that's the quote. Let me go to Google, because I had a few thoughts on that issue, kind of off topic, but I think it's you can't go. Yeah. Thomas Wolfe novel. Yeah. You can't go home again. Posthumously in 1940. But I think the gist of it was that, I think that the synopsis of the story was, let's see. Yeah, let's see, because I've read the synopsis of this. I get the point, but I want to make sure I articulate it correctly. Okay, driven by dreams of literary success, George Weber has left his provincial hometown to make his name as a writer in New York City. When his first novel is published, it brings him the fame he has sought, but also brings a censure of his neighbors back home who are outraged by his depiction of them. Settled by their reaction and sure of himself's future, Weber begins a search for greater understanding. Okay, deep into New York's London. Okay, he goes to Berlin. Let's see, but in renewed love. So he winds up with a renewed love for his birthplace. So he says after going to Nazi Germany and all these other places, he longs for, basically his hometown. And okay, but the thing is, I think that the gist of it was that, you can't go home again because, you leave a place and then return to it later, but it's changed. Like it's not the home of your childhood. Now I have a little bit of background there. I don't talk about myself that often because I'm not all that interesting, but after, my parents got divorced, remarried, and because I'd grown up in northeastern New Jersey. I was just outside of, it was a New York City suburb, basically. It was an inner suburb of New York City. And until I about started high school, until I was about 14 or so. But the, the divorce agreement stipulated that because my mom and my brother and I could live in the family home until one of the two things happened. Either the younger child turned 18 or my mom remarried. So my mom remarried, so that triggered the sale of the home, blah, blah, blah. So, and both my mom and my stepdad were into horses. My mom had a horse for as long as I could remember in a commercial stable. So they relocated, but they probably would have liked to move out of the state, but because, my birth dad was still in the state and the way the laws work. But in any case, long story short, so we relocated about an hour and change away by drive to a rural area that was very, very different from where I grew up. And you think, okay, not only are you still in the United States, you're still in the same state. It was very, very different. And I struggled to fit in. I did okay as a teenager, but it's at least initially it was a culture shock. I struggled to fit in, but one of the things I wanted to do was because I, again, sort of like longed for that childhood where I grew up because all the great friends I had and all the fun we had and the schools I went to and. Because I was really happy as a younger kid. So once I put myself through college and got a real job. So what I did was, I moved back to my old neighborhood. But it was kind of like this was because, and it wasn't a bad experience, but what I'd found though was that in the intervening 10 years, everybody had moved on. Right. First of all, most of the family either moved on or died. Pretty much everybody I grew up with had left the area. It's a really expensive area. People get, priced out of the market in places like that. Like you can't, people can't, afford to live in the neighborhoods they grew up in because of the housing bubble, essentially. So the whole thing was kind of like disappointing. I stayed there and I lived there because, I got married and my wife she wasn't from the area, but she was really into that whole sort of like New Jersey, like bourgeoisie culture.
Okay.
And, because at that point, because even at that time, I was like, now I'm in my 30s and I'm thinking like, I just want to get the hell out of here, because, the dream is over. But yeah, it's tough relocating. One thing I can say, though, is that I wound up down here because we'd been coming down here Well, I spent a lot of time in South Florida as a kid because I had one set of grandparents there, but we were coming down to this part of North Florida on vacation, and I really loved the area. So when I became single again, I just realized, like, literally there's nothing for me here because even at the time I can work anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's an expensive area really with nothing to offer because I have no friends here. Well, I guess I had some newer acquaintances, but I really didn't have a lot of friends there. I didn't have family ties. I didn't have economic ties, so I left. But Florida is a good place to go if you want to just like leave someplace and start over because it's a fairly transient population. You get people from other parts of Florida, other parts of the U.S., other nations. It's a very popular for, immigrants from various places also. So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like, yeah, you can't. So I guess, you just go someplace and, find a home. But it kind of, that's what happened to you. It sounds like when you move back to Hungary and you realize that the dog cult had totally assimilated everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
really.
It's like
yeah.
I like it. It's like they're like, I don't know if you watch Star Trek, but the Borg, those cyber, zombies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they're like they're like the Borg. They just go in, they just take over everything, and it really
exactly.
became a problem, particularly here. I guess it's kind of tough. It really seems like things started to change in the late '90s, early 2000s. And became just like a huge problem in the 2010s. I mean, all these dog-related issues, dog cult. So I could see, you move out of an area, and then you say, oh, maybe I'll go back there, and you realize, yeah, it's been overrun with a dog Borg.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Resistance is futile.
Exactly, that was the sentence, yeah.
Yeah,
that must be it, really. It's, yeah, it's exactly as you said, I just came back and I thought, it would be interesting to see what it's like here. And so, and I just realized there's just absolutely nothing for me here. This. Like even if the dog problem was not that prevalent, besides that, there's also not very much here that I just grew up in a totally different culture, and it's just I can't really with the stuff here. But I mean, the dogs they just make it absolutely unbearable. So it's at least I don't have to contemplate this problem for a long time and ponder, should I or should I not? And the decision is clear anyway. So that's also an advantage,
Yeah.
That you don't have to spend months with the contemplation and kind of thinking about, should I move away or should I not? Or it's just sometimes you just have one choice, and then you just do that.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm kind of moving towards, I don't think I'm maybe leaving Florida or maybe going all that far away, but I have, for a lot of reasons, I want, a property with acreage, just because it's more conducive to my interests overall. But this is an issue also. Like I said, I've got I've really only got two neighbors to worry about. And this is the second time I've had a dog problem across the street. Hopefully in remission or going to cure. Like I said, knock on wood, it's been pretty good. But yeah, I hear you. I mean, my decision to leave New Jersey really had nothing to do with dogs, because and it wasn't even that long ago. What was it, like late 2000s? It just wasn't even under my radar, and it never really, it was something I never really, thought about. But it was after that, and it wasn't that long after I moved down here. The problem across the street and problems in other, venues also. So it's, it's a shame, but you always got to make sure if you're going to relocate that you're not jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's why I said definitely, next place, no close neighbors. So even if they could be the biggest dog nut in the world, and it really won't matter too much, But you got to wonder, yeah, with these people, it's it's interesting because they say, oh yeah, well, it's been like this, and we can, essentially keep doing this because we've been doing it. It sounds like that's the point they're trying to make.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, though, was that actually it's probably true in a lot of places, not just where you are, but even here, was that it really wasn't like this until relatively recently, like with the dangerous dogs and the barking dogs and all these other dogs in restaurants. This wasn't a thing until, 10, 15 years ago. When it just exploded everywhere. And it's like you could say, look, this isn't the natural state of things, right? Because it wasn't like this 35 years ago.
Yeah.
But, because you could say, yeah, you know what? Like, it wasn't like this. It was because, yeah, you insane dog nutters made it like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's relatively recent. So
I also think, yeah, I mean, when I think back, then I mean, I can't remember that it was like that. I mean, I'm over 40 years old as well now, so I mean, yeah, there's a possibility that I have complete amnesia. I mean, that who knows? But no, I mean, I've never seen it like that before, and also, yeah, as you said, it's not really an argument, because I mean, what vexes me as well is this kind of mob mentality, that they just say, even if it was true that they said, yeah, it has always been like that, or it has been like that for 30 years. That, as you said, if there's one person whose life you make miserable, and you just have to understand that it's your job to do something about it, and it's not this mentality. I just hate this mentality, that people think, well, we are the majority, so now you have to obey. I mean, that's just a fascist. It really is just a fascist mentality.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
And
I see these people. Yeah, they're like, yeah, they're almost more like neo-feudalists or something. Or like, well, we've got the numbers, we've got the power, so we can do whatever we want.
yeah,
But that's, talk about golden rule. What a shitty attitude, because somebody else could do that to them just as easily. Like if they were to move in here, it's like, look, we outnumber you. Right?
Yeah.
So when we say shut your dog up, we mean it. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like shut him up or else. And you don't want to find out what or else is.
Yeah.
But yeah, what goes around comes around. You're right. Eventually they'll get theirs. You hope. I mean, you hope. They should. They deserve it. If they deserve it for the problems they've caused to others. So.
Yeah, that's yeah. Look, I mean, I'm actually pretty sure that if you really look at their existence, I don't think that they're really happy people.
They're not.
Like if I look at the people here, I don't think that they really are like kind of well balanced, or that also that, as you said, they're just not healthy. You also see that they're not healthy. But they just don't understand that, as you said before, there's also that thing that, if you have the barking going on during the night, I mean, even if you actually think yet that you don't hear it and you sleep normally, you don't sleep normally, because your brain is still, your brain is not shut down, your brain is still working, and your ears are still working, and there's a lot happening during your sleep that you don't notice, and the barking still ruins your health while you are asleep.
Because even if it doesn't, that kind of noise pollution, can impact you even if you sleep through it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, my neighbor, for instance, the one with the German Shepherd, I think he's 57 or 58 or something, and he's had 2 strokes.
Yeah.
Oh no, not strokes. Sorry, heart attacks. He had 2 heart attacks already. And I mean, okay, I mean, he drinks a lot, and he really likes to eat a lot of unhealthy food. Okay, I'm not saying that it's because of the barking, but I mean, he's definitely not making the situation better.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's probably, I mean, I'm sure the noise pollution is a factor because, what I'm talking about, like, the effect that that noise has in your body is a real thing. So
Yeah.
it's probably, it's a comorbidity, I guess you could call it. It's not the sole reason, but, and I guess it sounds like he's somebody who's just really not that interested in, keeping up his health. People's personal habits are really none of my business until they become my business.
Yeah.
So, they kind of, one of my blog commenters a long time ago likened it to secondhand smoke. And, which, I mean, it kind of, the metaphor kind of works because, well, first of all, like cigarette smoke won't, like one person smoking won't air pollute like an entire square kilometer.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
but too, as I think in our EPA estimated, I think it was back in the 1980s, that secondhand smoke killed something like 8,000 Americans a year, right? So it's a very real thing. I don't know where they got that number from, but but it's a very real thing that affects other people. And the smokers could say, well, yeah, it's not bothering me. Well, of course not.
Yeah.
Because they don't give a shit, right? So they're fine with it, but not everybody else is, And I guess it was rough. I mean, really back in the US, like in the 50s, it was like, I think most people smoked, but there was at least a somewhat of a majority. But too, and I don't get into people's personal habits too much, but it's like, yeah, just whatever, you just do whatever baloney you want, but don't inflict it on other people. It's just wrong, period.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because some folks in our space make the case that they talk about how gross and disgusting dogs are, and they're just nasty, and they stink, and they just befoul the home and all that. And I don't disagree. I'm not going to say, oh no, you're wrong. But again, if they want to like just immerse themselves in noise and filth and violence, I guess they can do that. I'm not into telling people how to live, but they shouldn't tell us how to live, because their narrative is that, look, these downsides of having a dog are going to be inflicted on you, whether you like it or not. And I say, bullshit, nuts. No way. I mean, it's like, look, you can keep the dog as long as it's not a problem for anybody else. But as soon as you make it a problem for somebody else, that's, it's over the line. But
yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. But try to hammer that into their heads. It's just not going. And I think actually your comparison, with the smoking, that's actually very accurate. Because also that I think I mentioned that even in one of the videos, that these dog owners, they actually do remind me of, I mean, you probably remember that as well, in the 90s when this big crackdown came on the tobacco companies.
Yep.
Then you probably remember, these all these tobacco company executives standing in front of courts and swearing that they are absolutely sure that smoking does not do anything to you, although it was absolutely crystal clear that, like, everybody knew that by then, and these clowns were just standing there and just as the excuses of the dog owners, like, it's not bothering me, or I've been smoking for 10 years and I've never had anything, and etc.
Yeah.
And they really remind me of these tobacco company executives sometimes, and they were all going on about, yeah, but everybody does it, everybody smokes, and like, you are the minority, so like, why don't you just accommodate us,
Yeah.
And look at today,
Oh yeah.
like how the tables have turned.
Yeah, they got put in their place,
Yeah.
And smoking is well, the problem is, they banned smoking in pretty much all indoor public spaces, but now they're full of mutts, which actually, in my opinion, I'd almost rather be like, I mean, I don't want either, but I'm almost like, you know what, get rid of the mutts and bring the smokers back.
Yeah.
I mean, not
that's true.
You know, I mean, I'm not saying I necessarily want that to be the outcome, but you know, because when I mean, I guess talk about being used to it. I remember when I was a kid, like back when I was a pretty little kid back in the 70s, it was like, every time you walked into an office building or a restaurant, even hospitals, everything smelled like smoke.
Yeah.
There's smoke everywhere. You know?
We had that in Europe, like until, like, I would say like 20 years ago. That was totally normal, you know, that you could smoke everywhere. And I mean, in the US, you were much more strict with cracking down on smoking. And I think still today, you know, this cliche of the smoking European, I mean, it's not just, you know, it's not too far-fetched. I mean, there's a true core to it. I mean, we are much more relaxed with the smoking still today. But I mean, I remember, you know, that when I was a child, I mean, you could smoke in the train, you could smoke on the airplanes, you could smoke in the office, everywhere. Yeah. And I mean, as you said, I would actually still prefer that to the dogs, to be honest. Yeah.
It would be less bad in my opinion. Yeah. Well, at least you know, cigarettes don't bark. They don't. They don't rip people's arms and legs off. They don't deposit urine and feces everywhere. They don't.
Exactly.
They don't jump up on people. You know, it's I remember here because actually I didn't smoke for very long, just a few years. When I was in college, this was like late 80s. I remember that they banned smoking in all indoor areas of the campus. It was maybe my second year. And you can only because they had, and even at the time, I think it was only they had like, I think student lounges allowed it. There's still like, even then you're only allowed to smoke in some indoor spaces, but it's one point, maybe it was 88 or 89, they just boom. Like you can take it outside, you know, and now some places they even ban it even in outdoor public spaces. So you know, I can't remember, some big company did that. They didn't allow smoking even outdoors on the company campus.
Wow. Yeah.
So you had to actually, I guess, if you wanted to smoke, you actually had to go off property. And you know, I think they did that because you would go, if you're like when they started banning smoking in these office buildings, you'd have to sort of run the gauntlet of smokers going in and out, you know, because all the entrances, all the doorways would just be swamped with people smoking. So there'd be this big cloud just outside, and some of that smoke, you know, the doors would open, it would get into the buildings, and they started saying no smoking within 50 feet of the entrance.
Exactly.
No mutts within 50 feet of the entrance, but and you know, like a mutt, it doesn't do anything for you. You know,
exactly.
There's absolutely there's no you know count, like because I can remember from smoking, it's like all you're just smoking to, you know, cure basically the withdrawal symptoms, because you don't smoke for a while, because you go into withdrawal pretty quickly, and then you have a smoke, it's like, I feel so much better, and then an hour or two later it's the same thing all over.
Exactly.
I remember what it was like. Rough. So. Wow, we've been talking about most of these barking dogs for 2 hours. I think
true.
This has been terrific. We got to do this again.
Sure.
It'd even be interesting too. One thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know if anybody's even stayed on this long, particularly because we've been sort of going off onto tangents and things like that. But you know, I do pre-record these because some folks have said, "Oh, I'm kind of nervous going live," these aren't live, so they're, you know, pre-recorded for upload later. Like right now, it's Friday morning where you are. It's Thursday night where I am. So I'll probably upload this. I'll post it probably tomorrow night. I'll just do maybe a little editing, maybe just trim the beginning and the end and put a title card in and upload it, and we'll be good to go. So
sounds good.
but it's a good topic because, you know, talking about barking, it's like barking is the number one reason people get into this space. I would say it's the number one reason that people don't like dogs or critical of dogs, dog owners, and dog culture.
Mm-hmm.
It's because, and the thing is, it's because you can't, way more so even than dangerous dogs. You know, I can manage dangerous dogs to a point. I can mitigate that. Like, you take the dog across the street, like I'm safe in my home. I'm not going to be attacked by a dog right now, but I can be noise polluted by one. Like there's no, there's literally, it's like a horror movie. There's no escape.
Yeah.
And that's just wrong. You know,
exactly.
I mean, the dog attacks are wrong too. I actually wanted to get into dog attacks and self-defense, but we can talk about that some other time. But
sure.
Yeah, it's been great, man. This has been terrific. It's just been great. Thanks for staying up so late or getting up so early.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah,
thanks for the invite.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, anytime, you know, anytime when I schedule these, I don't know, at some point in the future, I might say, okay, I just want to talk to this person about something. And sometimes they'll do that. Like if a new person joins and there's a bunch of people on, I'll kind of, you know, interview them a little, say, tell us about yourself, why you're in the space and things like that. But or if somebody has a topic they want to discuss. But yeah, anytime I post them on the Discord, you see the event. So if you see the event posted, just, feel free to join.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
And you are welcome. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. So, okay, this is Animal Uncontrol. And as always, people first. Later, Joe.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Later, man. Bye.
Bye-bye.